he gave me a book on art forgery. I found myself drawn to these old masters. How did these artists take paint from a palette, arrange it on a canvas? I began to unlock the secrets. I was a storehouse of knowledge of how to create an illusion, present it to an experienced expert, manipulate his mind, and convince him and bring him to the inevitable conclusion that the painting is genuine. We flooded the market with my paintings, and I couldn't believe what I did. I couldn't believe it. Then the dominoes started falling, and eventually the FBI were led to my door. They uncovered a mountain of evidence against me.
But they never actually got you. At this point, you've sold a lot. You've got like $1 million in cash. You sold one painting for $717,000. Why did it go away? Why did you never get indicted? And how are we having this conversation?
I guess that's the greatest story of all.
To hear how Ken Perenni made millions in art forgery, dodged the mafia and the FBI, subscribe to The Jordan Harbinger Show and check out episode 282 in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, he was a legendary lawman whose story was made famous in the movie Walking Tall. But did the legend cover for a true monster? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my thoroughbred of a co-host, Alice.
If this were not the day before the Kentucky Derby. Wow. Oh, my goodness. I guess it's better than, like, the quarter horse. A real ass of a co-host.
Factory-bound co-host.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, I'll let that one pass because I do love my thoroughbreds. I love all them horses. But you guys are well past this once you hear it on the feed. But tomorrow is a national holiday at Brett's house.
It's true.
As it well should be. Because he makes I think he does it just so he can serve everyone mint juleps.
I love mint juleps.
Because they're delicious.
As I've said before, I think I've told the story before. You know, when you've done 300 and whatever episodes, I've been doing this 6 years, you lose track of the stories you've told. I feel like I'm like an old man telling all my stories again. But the whole reason, like, my children exist because of the Kentucky Derby. Because my wife, when I met her, she was from Kentucky, and I'd always wanted to go to the Kentucky Derby. So I was immediately, like, attracted to her. I was like, oh, wait, if I date this girl, maybe I can go to the Kentucky Derby. And sure enough,
you used her to go to the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah. Well, yeah. The first year we were dating, we went to the Kentucky Derby. It's the first time I'd ever been. But I'll say I stuck with her after that. So it wasn't
true love.
Just for the Kentucky Derby. But that was definitely an incentive to start a relationship. So there you go.
Okay. What a love story.
But you know
Talking about love stories.
Yeah.
It's a better love story than what we're about to cover today.
It's totally true. And we're not going to talk about horses or anything. We're not even in Kentucky. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just, we just happen to be recording the day before the Kentucky Derby.
These are like little time capsules, of our lives. I think about that all the time when I go back and listen, I'm like, wow, I can totally be brought back to that point in our lives. So we need to remember Kentucky Derby 2026 with this episode.
There you go. So, Alice, have you ever listened to the Drive-By Truckers?
Of course.
There you go.
I am from the South.
Yeah, and Jason Isbell, who was a big part of that and then went on to a huge success as a solo artist. Well, if you've listened to the Drive-By Truckers, even if for no other reason you have no familiarity with a man named Buford Pusser, you would be familiar with him from the Drive-By Truckers and their songs, because most of the guys in that band were from a county just on the border with Tennessee in North Alabama. And Buford Pusser was a famous lawman who was feared, respected, beloved, depending on who you ask, in that area, and in fact had come to be well known around the world because of a movie, Walking Tall, or Walk Tall. Walk Tall or Walking Tall? I'm not sure which
Walking
one.
Tall.
Is it Walking Tall? Whatever. It involves moving your feet forward while being tall. About him, which eventually was remade starring The Rock. So this is somebody who's obviously very famous. And, you know, we love law enforcement here. So obviously we would want to tell a story about someone who is so famous in law enforcement. But if you've ever listened to those Drive-By Truckers songs, you may notice there's a bit of an undercurrent about Buford Pusser, that maybe he's not everything the legends cracked him up to be. And spoiler alert, the Drive-By Truckers might have been a little bit more perceptive than the average person when it came to this particular lawman.
Yes, because that song came out decades ago at this point.
A while
More than
ago,
decade
yeah.
A long time ago. And there's only been recent revelations about this lawman who really is kind of the prototype when we think of Walking Tall lawman who keeps law going around. And you know what? You have to have people fear you if you're going to be able to be the lawman in town.
And, you know, he's a sheriff. And in the sort of American system, going back to Britain, I don't know if it's still like this in Britain or not, but sheriffs are a very different kind of law enforcement official than your average police officer. Like, if you think if you're a police chief, is usually a very staid, reserved person, a public employee, often hired by the city. Sheriffs are elected. They tend to have huge personalities. If you know of any sheriffs in the United States, it's probably because they have a huge personality.
I mean, we're covering one, right? Aaron Spencer, who is running for sheriff in order to protest being arrested for killing his, young daughter's molester, rapist. But yeah, no, sheriffs are like, I will say every time I drive by a sheriff's car, I kind of like tense up a little. It's something about the word sheriff is a little bit more intense than just police.
Sheriff mentioned in the Magna Carta. So, I mean, just like how far back, the Sheriff of Nottingham, and it didn't exactly, clothe himself in glory. But anyways, so we're talking about sheriffs today, and we're going to talk about what should have been a love story, what's been presented as a love story for decades, but maybe was something much worse. So, for those of you who are not familiar with this story, let's dive in. Pauline Mullins was born on February 27th, 1932 in Dickinson, Virginia, to parents Jackson Mullins and Bertha Hill. In 1949, she married her first husband, Roman Vance. Pauline and Roman had 2 children together, Diane and Michael, but they ultimately divorced. It was a very unhappy relationship and an abusive one. Then there's Buford Pusser. So Buford was born December 12th, 1937 in Adamsville, Tennessee. Growing up, he was tall and athletic, excelling in both football and wrestling. Old-fashioned Greco-style wrestling. But like so many Greco-style wrestlers in the past, he decided there's no future in wrestling. The future's in wrestling. And in 1957, Buford moved to Chicago to pursue wrestling professionally under the name Buford the Bull.
So just 2 years later, he met Pauline Mullins in Chicago. The pair hit it off instantly, and they were married in 1959. He wrestled for a couple more years until Pauline and Buford welcomed a baby girl, Dwana. In 1961, the family moved back to Buford's hometown of Adamsville, Tennessee. His father was the police chief in Adamsville at the time, and Buford intended to follow in his footsteps. Buford got a job at the Adamsville Police Department and rose through the ranks rather quickly. In 1962, he became the police chief when his father retired. In 1964, Buford was elected sheriff of McNairy County. As sheriff, Buford quickly made a name for himself and was known to be tough on crime. Specifically, he cracked down on illegal moonshine and targeted the Dixie Mafia and State Line mob.
And we're going to talk a lot about these groups later. We should do a whole episode on the Dixie Mafia, which is one of the most violent organizations in American history. Most people don't even know it existed, but if you ever lived in the South, especially if you lived in a small town, you either suffered under the Dixie Mafia or you heard stories about the Dixie Mafia. Very powerful everywhere. And honestly, if you mess with the Dixie Mafia, it was a really good way to get killed. And Buford's tactics earned him a lot of powerful enemies. Several assassination attempts were made on him, and he had been shot 3 times in different confrontations over the years. So, when his wife Pauline was murdered, in what appeared to be another attempt on Buford's life, no one batted an eye at his story. But, nearly 50 years after the murder, the truth has finally been revealed.
So, let's go through the timeline. Now we're going back in history a little bit. December 12th, 1959, a week after marrying Pauline, Buford and 2 friends drive to Adamsville to a restaurant called the Plantation Club. There, they'd get into an altercation with the owner, W.O. Hathcock, who later pressed charges for attempted murder. Pusser dodged the charge. He was acquitted by a jury after several witnesses testified that he wasn't in the state at the time.
One of those witnesses was his new wife, Pauline, who had just married him. Very sort of interesting story about how that all went down. You know, sometimes I feel like in the past, in like the mid 20th century, things were like people think they are now. Like people will describe small towns and a lot of stuff that goes on in these counties as if it's still the 1950s. In the 1950s, a lot of this stuff really did happen. It's hard to do this kind of thing in the age of social media because anything can become a huge story. But I think some of the stuff that happened in the mid part of the last century was kind of crazy. And this is a circumstance where they go down to this place. There's this altercation. I think, honestly, the best way to describe this is an attempted robbery / attempted murder. Buford Pusser had all these stories he would tell about himself. And one of the stories he told was that several years before this, he was attacked by these ruffians and he had to like fight them off and he barely survived. And he would say that W.O. Hathcock was one of those people. So in the legend that grows up about him, this happened, but it was sort of justifiable revenge. It was a righteous thing, and it was a good thing that he managed to get off. But either way, you know, he goes to Adamsville, he moves to Adamsville, he's doing all this stuff. His dad obviously has a lot of influence. He's working in the local police department. He becomes the police chief. But as we said, police chief's a very different thing from sheriff. And Pusser will decide to run for sheriff. And in fact, he runs at the age of only 26 years old, very young. And not only does he run, he wins this election. Now, his victory came as something of a shock, but it happened only after the incumbent died in a car crash. And I will tell you, I looked into this because I was curious about, that's awfully coincidental that he's running for sheriff and the man he's running against,
shall we say.
just so happens to die in a car crash. It was absolutely a car crash. There's all sorts of evidence that there were witnesses, everything else. It was a very sort of standard car crash. His tire blew out, basically. He lost control, wrecked. The people behind him, pulled up. They tried to help, but he basically died instantly. So very much sort of a typical thing, but you would not be wrong to be suspicious. So, Pusser wins at 26. He's got a lot of energy, and he immediately puts that to work, warring with illegal moonshine rackets in the area, which are run by the Dixie Mafia and the state line mob. And there were some over the years who would claim that this war was less about ending the liquor trade and enforcing the law as it was about eliminating the competition, and that Pusser may, in fact, have been involved in the illegal moonshine whiskey trade himself. And in fact, later on, Pusser's stepdaughter, Diane, would report that after these raids where they would stop a truck full of moonshine, those proceeds would end up stored all over the house, including underneath her bed, only to disappear as readily as they appeared.
Oh, good old moonshine. So, February 1st, 1966, Pusser reported of a robbery at the Shamrock Hotel, which, you've heard of him before, was owned by W.O. Hathcock's sister-in-law, Louise. According to Pusser, Louise attacked him, and he was forced to shoot her in self-defense. Twice. In the back.
Yeah.
That's a tough case.
She was doing like a roundhouse kick. And she was
as she was roundhouse kicking him.
Exactly.
She did 2 roundhouse kicks.
Yeah, exactly.
First, shot her in the back, and she did another roundhouse kick and shot her in the back again.
These things happen.
That's some good self-defense. So an insider would later sign an affidavit claiming that Louise paid Pusser $600 a month to look the other way about her own involvement in the alcohol trade. Now, there's a lot going on. We always say when there's smoke, sometimes there's fire, but let's keep going. January 1967, Pusser went to the hospital, not, for like a sports injury or, burning his hand on the stove from cooking some hot skillet gravy. Nope. He goes to the hospital because he's been shot twice in the face. Pusser would tell the police, he would tell them that he received these wounds after an ambush on the state line by gangsters.
And look, I mean, that may well have happened. There's a lot of mystery, I'll say. I don't know if there's really that much mystery, but...
You could see why perhaps a TV show or a movie was made about him.
He's definitely getting shot by gangsters. Now, whether it's because he's this upstanding law enforcement officer, he's trying to stop these gangsters, or because he's in competition with them and gangsters shoot gangsters, I'll leave that for you to decide.
At least he wasn't shot in the back.
Exactly.
So,
twice in the back.
Twice in the back.
Self-defense.
Just twice in the face. So, he's alive. And boy, is he alive. Because on August 8th, according to one of his deputies, Pusser is feeling so good, so well, in fact, that he actually strikes Pauline in the face, breaking her nose. Now, there's no record of this. People say it, and you know how innuendo and gossip can spread. But later on, after Pauline dies, they do an autopsy of her. This is many, many decades later. And that autopsy does show that her nose had been broken. So it leads credibility to this gossip or story that Pusser is not just violent in his job, but perhaps at home as well.
And this is going to become important. As Alan said, that happened on August 8th. Fast forward only a couple days. August 11th, going into August 12th, 1967. In the late hours of August 11th, into the early hours of August 12th, 2 women were leaving the Old Hickory Club, which was located just across the state line. Obviously, alcohol laws in the South, I don't know how much those of you not from the South are familiar with this, those of you in other countries, but we have a phenomenon called dry counties, dry cities. So, for instance, I grew up in a dry county, and what that means is there's no alcohol in the county. You can't sell alcohol in stores. You can't sell alcohol in restaurants. When I was in high school, the main city went wet, which meant they could sell alcohol. And now the whole county is wet. And we've been moving towards being able to sell alcohol pretty much everywhere. But when I was growing up, certainly in the 60s, there were a lot of places where you could not legally purchase alcohol. So I grew up in a little county, and literally right across the county line into Jefferson County, there was a place called the Booby Trap, which is famous. Booby Trap was, as you can guess, a topless bar. And that was the first place you could buy alcohol going across the state line.
I'm sorry. But when you have a really good pun like that, you
just love that.
Just be able to get away with it.
And so... Let me say this, and this is not just the South. When I was in law school in Massachusetts, there was a state referendum on whether or not to sell beer and wine in grocery stores because you can only get them in package stores. And it failed when I was in law school. So American liquor laws are a little strange. Anyways, Booby Trap.
Or you're old.
Well, it wasn't that long ago.
I know. I'm just
It was
kidding.
after the turn of the century. Anyway.
It was after the turn of the century.
There's a famous weathercaster called James Spann in Alabama, and he just knows the whole state. And one time, there's a tornado right on the the border between Walker County and Jefferson County. And he's like, and we got this tornado coming. This is right between the Booby Trap and the Green Top, if you're familiar with this area. And it's like,
and it was so accurate.
That's exactly where it was. Anyway, Booby Trap for sale right now, by the way. So if you have any interest in purchasing it, it is for sale. You can own a piece of Alabama history. Nevertheless, so whole point of this story, obviously where Pusser is dry. That's why they have all this moonshine illegal liquor. But just across the state line, you can get all the drinks you want. And wouldn't you know it, people from the area tended to travel across the state line so they could go drink. And these two ladies are leaving this old Hickory Club, about to head back home, and they hear two people arguing. And they recognize them as the Pussers. So Buford and his wife have come down to the bar as well. Now, it was well known that Pusser cheated on his wife. He had lots of girlfriends, but his wife, Pauline, had apparently found out that he'd been sleeping with a black woman who would sometimes visit relatives in the area. Now, this is 1967 in the Deep South. This is the kind of thing that if it gets out could be very detrimental to Buford. And Pauline, it wasn't that she was like super racist and she was fine with him sleeping around, but she didn't like it when he was sleeping with a black woman. No, she had been thinking about getting a divorce and she had been planning on getting a divorce. And this was a piece of information that was really critical to her because at the time, in order to get a divorce, you had to show fault. So you had to show why you were seeking a divorce. You couldn't just go in and say, hey, I want a divorce. And this was a key piece of information. And the fact that she now knew that Buford was not only unfaithful, but had been sleeping with a black woman in 1967 Tennessee, this was a gold mine for her. And the last thing the women heard her say before she was pulled into a car and the car sped off was, I'll ruin you.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket.
Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. The first law firm to answer usually wins the client. But when you're in court, in a deposition, or heads down on a case, calls get missed and opportunities slip away. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, the smarter way to run your firm's communications. Quo, QUO, gives your firm speed to lead routing, an AI receptionist that provides 24/7 support, and one shared inbox so every attorney, paralegal, and staffer stays in sync. Quo is the #1 business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 reviews, built for how modern teams actually work. More than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing firms, rely on Quo. Quo's speed to lead routing makes sure new client calls never go unanswered, even after hours. A 24/7 AI receptionist and local numbers that boost answer rates mean your firm stays competitive whether your team is in court, in a meeting, or out of the office.
Every attorney, paralegal, and staffer can work out of one shared number, so everyone sees the full conversation history, so your team responds faster and every client feels like a priority. Quo isn't just a phone system. It's a smarter way to run your firm. Quo automatically logs every call, generates summaries, and highlights next steps, so no detail ever gets missed, and it integrates with the tools your firm already has, like Clio, Lawmatics, MyCase, and HubSpot. Be the firm that answers first. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/prosecutors. That's QUO.com/prosecutors. Quo, no missed calls, no missed opportunities. And remember, becoming sheriff at 26, he is not going to stop there, right? Like he has big plans, and I'll ruin you is quite the threat for a man like Pusser. The next morning, August 12th, 1967, Sheriff Pusser received a call about a disturbance near the state line at about 4:30 in the morning. According to Buford, his wife Pauline insisted on riding along with him to check it out. When they reached New Hope Road, he said, a black car pulled out behind them at New Hope Church and began firing into the vehicle. The side window was smashed, and though the bullets missed Buford, one hit Pauline right in the head. Buford quickly drove 2 miles down the road to try and escape. He pulled over and he began to attempt to help his wife, but the black car reappeared and began firing yet again. Pauline was struck in the head for a second time, and Buford was shot in the jaw. Pauline was killed instantly, but Buford, he was alive, though gravely injured. He spent the next 18 days in the hospital, and he required several surgeries to his jaw. Strangely, parts of Pauline's skull and brain were found 2 miles from the scene, as he described it.
So yeah, you have this really weird situation where, according to him, she's shot and it happens in the car 2 miles away from where he's eventually found. But there are these remains that aren't found in the car. They're found on the side of the road. And some people claimed they looked strangely staged. And there are things about this story that I don't know if they're true or not. There's like a 200-page report from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation you can read. It talks about this. But some witnesses said it seemed as though the brain and the skull had been arranged on the side of the road, which seems pretty weird. But he's having to explain why that's found in one place and the shooting appears to have happened somewhere else. And his explanation is, well, they came in, they shot her, we drove off, I stopped, I'm helping her, they show up again, they shoot her again, because she's been shot twice in the head, and they shoot me. Okay. I mean, you know, it is a little strange that if literally someone's skull and brain had been removed by the shot, attempting to help her at that point, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt just because loved ones often do really absurd things when someone is clearly dead and beyond help. That happens. And that's essentially what he's saying has happened. And people hear this story and think, well, this is crazy. I mean, this is a time in American history of extreme turbulence, violence, of people rebelling against the system, people fighting the man. This is the late 60s, the Vietnam protest, drugs, the civil rights era, the race riots of the 70s, the high crime in New York City. There is just this feeling of the country is spiraling out of control, and there are all these forces trying to destroy it. And then you have this lawman standing against this tide of disorder and suffering immensely for it. And you see, he gets out of the hospital and he provides police with the names of all 4 shooters. He knows exactly who did this. They might have been in a black car, but he knew who they were. These aren't men in black. This is not one of those where some mysterious person showed up and did this and disappeared. He knows the names. It's Kirksey McCord Jr., who is the leader of the Dixie Mafia and 3 other low-level hitmen in the gang. And I will tell you this, of all the people you could pick, Kirksey McCord is perfect because he was a stone-cold killer. And someone who would absolutely have killed a lawman. He eventually would go to prison for killing a judge. Just a bad guy, right? And over the next 3 years, all these men, with the exception of Kirksey, were killed one by one mysteriously, though many believe that Buford Pusser was responsible for their deaths. Kirksey would escape vengeance because he'd killed so many people, he was already in prison, and he is still alive to this day. And he has always denied involvement in Pauline's murder.
So, you have this buildup and this timeline of Pusser going to war with all these mafia people, and this is the time, he shows up to the hospital with 2 shots to the face. He ends up shooting someone else in the back. This is a violent time. And so the fact that the Dixie Mafia shows up in the middle of the night shooting into them, it fits within everything that we've been seeing, leading up to this, essentially. So come Christmas Day, a year later, December 25th, 1968, Pusser responds to a disturbance involving Charles Hamilton. He's a convicted murderer. Hamilton fired on Pusser, who shot him dead in response. Now, look, Hamilton was a known killer, and you use deadly force in order to stop someone. You don't use it to slow someone down. So if Hamilton's going to fire at Pusser, then we would say, yeah, he gets to shoot back. But he shoots back, kills Hamilton in response. In 1972, Buford Pusser was defeated in his bid for re-election to sheriff. And then fast forward February 22nd, 1973, a movie based on Sheriff Buford Pusser's life, Walking Tall, is released. This is a big year for him. So he just lost the re-election the year before, but the next year, he is riding high. He is part of Hollywood. Walking Tall is all about the famous Sheriff Buford Pusser. It was directed by Phil Carlson, and it starred Joe Don Baker as Buford and Elizabeth Hartman as Pauline, and it was an absolute blockbuster. People loved it. I mean, you heard this timeline. You can't make up this type of stuff, except they're now getting to see it on the big screen. He is the quintessential sheriff.
Yeah, and it's going to get even better for him because, his law enforcement career is kind of coming to a halt, but all of a sudden, he's about to be a movie star because not only has he had this movie made about him, but now they want to make a sequel. And they decide, Joe Don Baker, he's great. But why have him when we can have Buford? And Buford Pusser, on August 2nd, 1974, will sign a contract to play himself in an upcoming sequel of Walking Tall. He attends a press conference in Memphis, letting the public know about this upcoming film. So he decides after this, he's going to go to sign some autographs because he's a big deal now. And he goes to the McNairy County Fair and Livestock Show in Selmer, Tennessee. Selmer. I love that. Selmer. And his daughter is there. He sees her. He's drinking vodka in his cup in Dry County, where he's enforcing on the alcohol laws. Drinking vodka. He's been drinking vodka all day. And he decides, okay, he's going to go home in his new Corvette. And while he's driving home, he hits an embankment at a high speed. He's only about 4 miles away from home. The car wrecks. It catches fire, and he is ejected from the vehicle. Unfortunately, his daughter was riding as a passenger in a car just behind him, and unfortunately came upon the scene and actually found her father. His final words were her name. Pusser did not survive his injuries and passed away. He was only 36 years old. Now, state troopers would determine that the cause of the accident was Pusser's drinking, high speed, and failure to wear a seatbelt, though many in the area believe to this day that the vehicle of the beloved sheriff was sabotaged. There had been at least 7 attempts on Pusser's life during his time as sheriff, so it was easy to believe that someone was successful, though no evidence has ever been shown to prove this, and the car to this day is in the Buford Pusser Museum in Adamsville, Tennessee, so you can go see it for yourself if you want to. No autopsy was performed because it was pretty obvious what happened. So that's 1974. Over the decades that followed, the legend of Buford Pusser would only continue to grow, and people would remember him as this sort of pillar of society, this man who stood against all of those forces of upheaval and crime that were rising in the country at the time. And more he's looked on as this hero in the movie is remembered, to the extent that they decided to make a remake of Walking Tall. And it debuted starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on April 2nd, 2004. Pretty good when The Rock's playing you. I mean, maybe one day The Rock will play me in a movie. Do you think?
I was going to say, even I'd be flattered if The Rock played me.
Yeah. But the plot did differ slightly in this version, and Pusser was not mentioned by name. But nevertheless, I mean, if you looked at Walking Tall, everyone knew it was a remake of the movie about Buford Pusser, and that was something that sort of generated even more attention. But the thing is, during this whole period of time, Even though Pusser was beloved, and even though he was praised, and even though people in Tennessee just thought he was amazing, and people in Nashville thought he was amazing, there were always this segment of people who believed that Buford Pusser was not what people thought he was. And they had pressed for years for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to look back into some of these events in Buford Pusser's life, in particular, the death of Pauline. And that's exactly what would happen.
So February 8th, 2024, though this is in some ways a historic case, it has really made some revelations recently. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigations oversaw the exhumation of Pauline Pusser's body from the Adamsville Cemetery in Adamsville, Tennessee. Now, this was done after the TBI received a tip that an autopsy was never performed on Pauline at the time of her murder, despite that strange scene, right? Bits of her brain and her head were found 2 miles away from the crime scene. You would think that alone would make things suspect, especially if you have 4 potential assassins out there. They want to recreate the scene, but that had never been done. And so the TBI decides to exhume her body. As a result, the state launched a new investigation to try and solve this decades-old cold case. Now, it was found during re-examination of the case that Dr. Michael Ravel, who is an emergency medicine physician and medical examiner, studied post-mortem photographs, crime scene photographs, and notes made by the medical examiner at the time and Buford Pusser's statements. And Dr. Ravel decided, after reviewing all these documents, he concluded that Pauline was more likely than not shot outside of the car than placed inside of it. In fact, Pauline had been shot twice in the back of the head, not the side of the head, but the back. And he also found that cranial trauma suffered by Pauline didn't match crime scene photographs of the car's interior. There was blood spatter on the hood outside the car, which is curious if she's supposed to be sitting in the passenger seat being shot at in like a drive-by shooting, but somehow her blood is on the outside of the car. And this obviously contradicts Buford Pusser's statements about how the shooting happened. And the gunshot wound on Pusser's cheek, that jaw shot that he sustained, it was actually a close contact wound and not one fired from a long range. Remember, Pusser said that he was trying to help his wife when all of a sudden that black car veered up and shot him, which would mean that there was at least kind of 2 cars in between the two of them, some sort of distance. But what Dr. Ravel saw was that this wound didn't come from some distance. It was very close range, so close range that Dr. Ravel thought it was likely self-inflicted. So Pauline's autopsy, after decades, of course, when they exhumed her body, showed that she had a broken nose that had healed prior to her death. Remember that August 8th? We're talking about this murder happening around August 13th. August 8th, the deputies had said that Pusser had broken Pauline's nose. And this autopsy shows that, in fact, her nose had been broken recently, but it had just healed. Davidson said statements from people who were around at the time, said she died, supported the conclusion that she was actually a victim of domestic violence.
It's interesting to me, some of the people who pushed hardest for this were the Hathcocks. So the people who had been sort of tortured by Buford Pusser for a long time and had at least one family member lost to his gun, they'd been pushing for years for somebody to look into this guy. And when they start looking into it, they're seeing this stuff. And look, now it all sorts of makes sense, right? Like we talked about, you got the 2 miles between the 2 crime scenes, and you got the brain and the skull found on the side of the road. If she was shot in the car, it's not impossible that you could have something like that happen. I mean, crazier things have happened, but it makes a lot more sense if she was shot outside of the car. Maybe, say, on the way home after that argument at the bar, shot outside of the car
by 2 women who were unrelated to the Pussers.
Exactly.
Right.
Then you see the blood and everything else on the hood. And what's causing that? I mean, to be frank, when her skull and her brain are being blown out of her head onto the side of the road. Pusser puts her in the car, starts driving down the road. He gets about 2 miles away and he realizes, I got to do something to make this make sense, right? And that's when he comes up with the attack. And it is really important, not just for this case, but for you to notice what he did. He shot himself in the face. He was in a hospital for weeks
Needed
because of
multiple
this.
surgeries.
Multiple surgeries. And just anytime you hear a case where it's alleged that a killer has self-inflicted a wound to make it seem like they were a victim as well, remember this case. When people are like, would Dolly Routier have really cut her own throat? Just to
get out of this?
Just to get out of a double homicide? Would she really have done that? The man shot himself in the face. These are the kind of things people do when they're trying to get away with murder. And that argument has never worked on me, and it shouldn't work on you either. And the more cases you see like this, the more you should realize people in desperate situations will do desperate things that seem crazy. And that seems crazy to me.
But isn't it convenient, though, that, by the way, it has to be his head? Because guess what? She shot in the head. And so for them to be sitting in the same car, it has to be of the same thing. Isn't it convenient, though, that she gets shot twice in the back of the head from this terrible drive-by shooting when really you would think the Dixie Mafia is after Pusser and not Pauline? That he only gets shot in the jaw? Something that, look, I can't bring myself. I think right now I can't bring myself to shoot myself in the jaw. But of all the places on my head, probably the safest bet to shoot right there. Because whatever, I'll just, have a broken jaw for a little bit. But I won't be dead. My brain won't be on the hood of the car.
And the thing is about the Dixie Mafia. So I grew up in a part of Alabama that was, some say still is. It's a little unclear whether the Dixie Mafia still exists. Some people say it doesn't exist anymore. Some people say it does. If you're listening, Dixie Mafia, I wouldn't claim that it still exists, of course. I would never say something like that. But I grew up in a part of Alabama that was very much the Dixie Mafia's territory. And just the stories you would hear about the things that happened and the way they owned the police and they owned the judges and the people who would die and they would disappear. People get blown up. In my lifetime, there was a guy blown up on his, I was in high school when this happened, blown up on his lawnmower. Never solved that one. There was a nurse blown up in her truck when she flipped the lawnmower guy when he engaged the blades. Boom. The lady blown up in her truck when she did the turn signal. Good reason never to use your turn signal. She did the turn signal, blew up. People get blown up all the time. They disappear. They end up in mine shafts or Smith Lake or wherever they end up. It was just the kind of thing where you just knew you just don't mess with these people. And if you mess with these people, you're going to end up dead. And the fact of the matter is that if Buford Pusser had been attacked that morning by the Dixie Mafia, they would have killed him. They would have gotten out of that car, opened that door, pulled him out, and shot him again in the head to make sure he was dead. The fact that he lived is the best evidence, some of the best evidence, that he was not targeted by the Dixie Mafia because he lived. And Allison's right. I mean, this is a pretty serious wound, but it's not being shot twice in the back of the head, which is a really good way to kill somebody, by the way. He was shot once in the cheek. It's rough. I don't want to get shot in the cheek. Bad place to get shot. But if you're going to get shot in the head, probably the best place. Pretty lucky if you're going to get shot in the head that it goes in your cheek. So it's not surprising that in August of 2025, after this investigation, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, they do release this multiple hundreds of pages of report concluding that Buford Pusser had indeed killed his wife. Now, he is long since died, and no charges can be brought against him. But this revelation has brought closure to Pauline's family. Her younger brother, Griffin Mullins, said he was grateful to know what happened to Pauline. He went on to say that he wasn't entirely surprised because he knew there was some trouble in her marriage, although she wasn't one to talk about her problems. He remembers his sister as sweet, as a people person, who anyone could go to an issue with for advice. Now, despite the fact that Buford Pusser has been identified as a murderer by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the Buford Pusser Museum is still open in Adamsville, Tennessee. You can still visit it, and every year they give the Buford Pusser Sheriff of the Year award to the sheriff somewhere.
Maybe now it turns into more of a serial killer of the of the year.
Probably like the Savannah Guthrie, her mom's case. That sheriff, he'll probably win it this year. But they give one every year. So in Adamsville, in that county in Tennessee, Pusser is still viewed as a hero, and many people reject the findings of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, it's the middle of May. It's getting warmer. Summer is upon us. You're probably looking around. Everybody's so happy they can't wait to do something amazing. And maybe you're thinking, why is it that I'm not feeling great? Well, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and maybe it's for a reason. Because, frankly, whatever's going on with you, you need help to get through it. No journey should be alone. Having someone with you to listen, to understand, and support you can make all the difference. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. They have quality therapists that work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the U.S. And they have a match commitment. They're going to match you with someone that they think is going to work for you. But if it doesn't, if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from their tailored recs.
With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally. And it works, with an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews. You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have someone with you in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/prosecutors. That's betterhelp.com/prosecutors. But what a fast and furious life. It's not like
That's the truth.
he did get away with murder for a very long time, but it's not like he then got to live this long life and died in his old age, a legend. He really went out in a fury, right? He signed a deal. He was about to be a movie star, and he ruined it all by being Pusser, right? He was always very close to the line, and I think that the drive-by truckers knew a little bit more. I think actually a lot of people knew this, and the fact that the TBI reopened this goes to how long this has been kind of the undercurrent about his reputation.
And if you want to listen to Drive-By Truckers, the album is The Dirty South, which has several songs that involve Buford Pusser, including, let's see, The Boys from Alabama is a big one about him. The Buford Stick. So the Buford Stick and the Boys from Alabama both prominently feature Buford Pusser and reference the fact that he was not exactly the upstanding lawman that some people wanted you to believe he was. So there you go, guys. And look, what can come from this? Number one, I think law enforcement's a little bit better than it was back then. And I think it also is worth noting that even after 50 years, you can still find justice in cases. If people are committed and they're dedicated to finding the truth and they don't let legend get in the way and they look to the science and they look to the facts and they follow the evidence, even a case like this can be solved. And so good for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for not covering this up, but for getting to the bottom of it. And I'm glad that Pauline and her family can finally get justice.
I'm so glad that Pauline still had living relatives to be able to have this type of closure, because, I mean, most people decades later know of Buford Pusser as the legend of walking tall rather than this incredibly violent person who lived a fiery life and was a murderer at the end of the day, and the worst kind of murder. Preyed on the weak, right? By weak, I mean he was the sheriff. He was elected to protect the citizens around him, and he used that same gun instead of protecting to turn it on his own wife because he had aspirations and she wanted a divorce, right? She said, I'll ruin you. I mean, this is years later. We don't know if she actually said that, but that's probably certainly the undertone of what was happening. And it wasn't like this came out of nowhere, especially when it comes to something like this. People don't usually just pull out a gun and kill their wives or kill their husbands. There's usually some sort of a history of domestic violence. And her autopsy shows that there probably was. That broken nose probably was preceded or in conjunction with lots of other bruises that don't show up on an autopsy decades later. And sure, there are always people who can snap in a moment. But Brett has said this before. If there's someone in your life who is willing to strangle you, they're able to kill you, right? And I say that because I have heard multiple, they're usually women, who say, well, he didn't mean to. He didn't really hurt me. If someone will put their hands around your neck, they are capable of ending your life, because that has been statistically shown to be basically the next step of strangling someone. Think about what it takes. It's an incredibly close contact. You're looking someone in the eyes. That doesn't stop you. And that's what you had here. And kind of like the other instances of violence that we have around Pusser, whatever Pauline said, whatever she threatened, he shot her like a coward. He shot her in the back of the head. He didn't shoot her in the front. I mean, even being this big, tall, walking tall man, he didn't do it like a man. He did it like a coward, as all cowards are who abuse and murder their loved ones. And so while this seems like this fantastical, wow, I really am so glad that we have closure this many decades later. This is a story that we see all the time, which is domestic abuse suffered in silence. And I hope what comes from this is not like more Buford Pusser awards and like more remakes of the movie Walking Tall, but rather to show that even the shiniest, flashiest Hollywood-like figures are not that far from the silent struggle that many, often women, face.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Alice, and I'm glad you brought it into the modern world and our modern problems. And Alice is right. We talked about the strangulation before. Someone will strangle you, they will kill you. It is just a matter of time. They will kill you. And, I would like to believe that no one listening to this podcast is dealing with that, but I know some of you are, and I know the situation is really difficult. And I know it's the easiest thing in the world to say, you should leave, because you know how dangerous leaving is. You know it from your own experience, and the statistics back you up. The most dangerous thing a woman can do is leave a man who's abusing her, because that is when oftentimes that abuse leads to murder. Unfortunately, staying isn't really an option either, because if you stay, as I said, eventually the same thing's going to happen. And all I can say is there are a lot of people out there who want to help you. There are a lot of resources out there. There are police officers. The one great thing about, I would say, the last 30 years, law enforcement's approach to abuse, to domestic violence has changed dramatically. It's no longer, well, that's a family affair. That's not something we want to be involved in. It's not something we take seriously. Law enforcement knows to take it seriously. They are trained to take it seriously. The laws take it more seriously. There are more resources available to you now. So please, 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 if you are in a situation like that, reach out to somebody, find help. Help's out there. I know it's hard. I know it's scary, but you don't deserve that. You deserve so much more and so much better, and you deserve to live in a safe place where you don't have to fear for your life every day. And this is just one of many examples. Like Alice said, this story has been told 1,000 times. Usually it's not a famous lawman, but it happens over and over again. So try and find help. Once again, we're not the best people to reach out to, but if we're the only people you can reach out to us. We're always willing to talk to you and do what we can to help. Well, Alice, is there anything else you want to say about this case or anything related to it before we move on?
I think it's actually kind of fitting that for once we did an episode in one episode, because I don't think Buford Pusser deserves more.
And
he's got awards, he's got movies after him. Pauline deserves more, and I'm glad that she finally has justice. But I kind of like that, we're able to do this case in one episode when we hardly ever are able to do that.
I know. It's so rare.
We like to call this like metaphorical justice.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, that's enough about Buford Pusser. As far as I'm concerned, we can never mention his name again. If you want to talk about somebody, talk about Pauline. Okay, well, Alice, do you want to answer a question?
Let's definitely do a question, because yesterday someone asked us about religion.
There you go. Now we're going to talk about politics. Okay, so this is, and by the way, if you leave a 5-star review, I think everybody knows this now. Leave a 5-star review, leave a question, we will answer them. So this one is about for-profit prisons. This is from 5 stars. 5 stars wants to know, do you believe that if for-profit prisons, i.e. private prisons, were eradicated, that sentencing bias would be eradicated too? What do you think? There's a lot going on there. I don't know what you mean by sentencing bias, but I can say, unless the judge is corrupt, which we've seen happen before. There's a famous case out of Pennsylvania with a judge who was sending, I think it was children to a children's I don't know what they call
Juvenile facility.
Juvenile facility, exactly, and getting kickbacks from it. And that guy was sent to prison and deserved it. But unless it's a corrupt judge, I don't think whether the profit's for profit or not for profit has anything to do with sentencing or sentencing disparities. So to the extent your question's asking that, no, I don't think it would have any effect on sentencing.
And again, there could be correct judges, but generally when you have a sentencing memo, or sentencing memos are just briefs that are written at sentencing, and then the probation officer, this is in the federal system because not all states and localities have enough funding for like an officer who does a full report. Those pre-sentence reports, they say everything about the person, takes into account the children they have, the financial aspects, where their family members live. There's no point in any of that process where there's a line that says something like how many beds do we have at jails? How many do we need to fill? Those are two completely separate things. So typically a judge has no idea whether the jails are full or have room for more people. So those are two completely different things. And the reason, so unfortunately in a lot of states, I can only speak for the state that I live in because I read the news about it, but most places there's overcrowding of prisons because they cost a lot of money to maintain. And so they can contract with for-profit not to make money from them, but in order to alleviate the very problems that civil rights suits are brought about in like overcrowding situations.
Let me just say this. I think generally speaking, for-profit, whenever someone talks about something that's for-profit, it's usually some sort of boogeyman to like, oh my gosh, for-profit, that must be bad. The vast majority of things in your life are for-profit, and most of them work pretty well. I mean, the profit motive, we live in a capitalist society. The profit motive generally is pretty good at creating like good things. So I don't necessarily think just because it's a for-profit prison, it's going to be worse than a state prison. And let me just say this. Are there bad things about for-profit prisons? Sure. Have you seen a state-run, not-for-profit prison? Because they're also really bad. So I think to some extent it's overstated. Prisons are a problem in the United States. We can debate this till the end of time, why this is true. We have a really large prison population. And most of the people in prison, despite what some people will tell you, are there for a really good reason. Because they're violent and they've done violent things and you want them to be in prison. But we have a prison overcrowding problem. And so some states have turned to a for-profit model to deal with that. I don't know if it's better than a purely state-run system or not. Maybe some intermediate system would be better, but just because it's for-profit, to me, that doesn't tell me anything. Like give me some content to that. Like, what is it about this particular for-profit prison? Because it may not even be all for-profit prisons that's problematic to you. Why do you think that's an issue? Is it better in a state-run prison? Because I think you need to show that too. If you want to point to, well, for-profit prisons do X and that's bad. Well, do comparable state prisons do that? Are they better at that? Are they actually worse at it? I mean, these are the kind of things I think you have to think about. Don't be blinded by these terms that are usually meant to incite you. Actually ask for some details and some content and use that information to make an informed decision about whether or not you think something is good or bad. That's my thoughts on that. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can find another less whatever question. Let's see.
You're allowed to ask anything. And these are good questions because when you hear it, you have a visceral reaction for profit. But now as I've gotten older, I actually realize, for profit means they have a motivation to make this better for me.
Yeah. And, and I get it. I mean, you could imagine it's for profit, so they really have to cut costs. So, the inmates get less good food, or they don't have as many televisions, or whatever. Like, you could imagine things, cost-cutting mechanisms that would be bad. And that may well be the case. I think the answer there, though, is, given that this is a quasi-governmental system, a sort of public-private partnership, all you need is, if you're going to have for-profit prisons, just have really high standards. And say, look, we will lease to you to do this, but you need to meet these minimum standards. And they either can do that or not. And if they can't do it, then there won't be any for-profit prisons. If they can do it, great. If they can't do it, you might ask yourself whether your standards are too high. I mean, that's also a possibility. But All right, let's see. Okay. This person wants to know, and we may have answered this before in some guys, but they want to know, how did we feel the first time True Crime Garage mentioned our podcast or reached out to us?
I'll let you answer, because this was like...
Pretty sure I immediately texted you. It was like, oh my God.
It was actually, I think your voice reached like another octave. It was very sweet. There's been a few times like that. Allison Sweeney, when she first reached out, we love you, Allison. Please come back. And True Crime Garage. And Tim and Lance.
Oh, yeah.
I would say those were like the three big or there's probably more I'm forgetting. Yeah. But I specifically remember when those types of things, like those outreaches happened, because I think you lost all cool. You are so excited. And I love seeing you like that, because you are so cool all the time.
I mean, that you really put your finger on it. I mean, those were three. So
there were moments in our, like, people have always asked, when do you think you made it? We didn't ever
so
make
many,
it.
Like,
but when stuff like that happens, you're like, I'm not nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when Tim and Lance first reached out, it's just weird. It's like anything else. And I'm sure everyone who's ever been in a field that has like really important, famous people or whatever, in any field, right? Like whatever field you're in, if there was a professor or a practitioner whose book was taught to you in school and then you have an interaction with them, it's sort of like, you're like, wow, I remember I was reading this guy's book and now I'm talking to him about X, Y, and Z. And so Tim and Lance, I mean, I'd listened to Missing Maura Murray and then Missing for years and just loved like everything they did. And then the first time they reached out to us and wanted us to come on their show, it was like, wow.
And it was like
crazy.
Episode 3.
It was so early.
It was like they really took a chance on us.
Did. That's why we call them our podfathers.
They are our podfathers. What it feels like, what it felt like, still does, even to this day, is like they're the ones who are the industry. Yeah. And for them to reach out, it like breaks that fourth wall. I'm like, no way we're part of the same industry.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
So that was cool. And then I think the first time True Crime Garage mentioned us, and this was doubly cool, was the Aisha degree case. Because we had done the Aisha degree case and then reached out to them and were like, hey, you guys are so much bigger and you have so much influence. This case is really interesting, and it's one that's become really important to us. Can you talk about it? And then they did. They talked about it, and they did episodes on it, and they mentioned us, and it was like, that was cool for two reasons. Number one, because I'd been listening to True Crime Garage for forever and just love True Crime Garage. And number two, that not only did they mention us, but it was in the context of this case that we thought was really important. It just felt like, wow, like, because this is fun. We love doing this. It's fun. There's so many reasons we want to do this podcast, but we actually would like to have a positive influence on the world. And it's hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. It's easy to say, but it's really hard to actually do it. And that felt like that. It felt like, wow, this story is now getting out to people who never would have heard it because they did this, and also a testament to them. Because they could have done anything, but they looked at they actually took the time to look at the case and said, let's do this case, and then talked about it. So yeah, those were pretty cool moments. And then obviously Allison Sweeney was just like, I mean,
that's still unreal. I still can't believe
every time we talk to her, it's unreal.
I know.
It's like,
she's great. She really is so cool on so many levels. And why also, this is going to be a humble brag, because I actually still can't believe it. I didn't believe it. Is it 3 years ago now? I couldn't believe it 3 years ago when we were nominees for CrimeCon's Clue Award Creator of the Year. I really thought that was a fluke. When we won it, the two of us looked at each other and just started laughing because we're like
a few seconds for us to actually
we were both like, they read the wrong name. Like, it's not us. It's Nancy Grace, clearly. And so thanks to you guys, we are one of the nominees again for Creator of the Year this year. And I can't believe it. Like, even though this is 3 years past and I look at that award behind you and I've never gotten to touch it for 3 years, I still can't believe that 3 years later people are listening to us and voted for us to be a fine. Like, we're not going to win. It's fine, because like, if you look at everybody else,
nominated.
It is an honor to be nominated. If you look at everyone else, they have like 10 times more subscribers than us. I don't know how we're in the same list.
Well, and it's a testament to you guys. It's a testament to our listeners and how awesome they are, and how I don't know what the word is, committed you guys are. Like, y'all, there's so many
I think what our
different people.
advertisers say is conversion rates.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
we might be small, but we're mighty
we
because
have
you
a
guys
really high
actually
conversion
care.
rate. Exactly. You guys really care, and it means so much to us. And it
You
keeps
guys
us
have
going.
bought so many Lola blankets.
Man, y'all keeping Lola in business. I mean, Lola
I really
blankets,
think it's only our podcast keeping Lola in business.
Yeah, we were in Utah and we saw a big billboard for Lola blankets, and I thought, we did that. So thank you guys, though, because it is all you. And that's one reason I love that award is it's purely based on
The people's
fans
choice.
voting. Y'all could have voted for anybody. You chose to vote for us, and we're in the top 5, and we just think that's awesome.
So I'd be remiss to say, because I'm just still so excited about it, come to CrimeCon. If you're not coming to CrimeCon, get someone to buy one for you. But we are selling CrimeCon only prosecutors. Prosecutor socks. We are very
Prosecutor
excited
socks.
about them. One size fits all, so it doesn't matter the size, because last year I got real stressed out about all the sizes of the shirts, guys. I'm
One
so
size
sorry
fits all.
about that.
Be a Prosesaki. You can
Be a Prosesaki.
Yeah. So can't wait to see you guys. I mean, by the time this drops, I'm not showing exactly the dates. This is either right before, I think this is right before CrimeCon. This will be the episode right before CrimeCon. So we'll be seeing you soon in Vegas. Can't wait. If you're buying a last minute ticket, Prosecutors, code Prosecutors for 10% off. Hope you'll be there. Caesar's Palace. It's going to be awesome. And yeah. And we are selling CrimeCon shirts. It's probably too late for that. But if you go to our store on Bonfire, you can get a Las Vegas themed CrimeCon shirt. I hope you'll check that out. All right, guys. Well, this has been awesome. If you have any thoughts, shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Add prosecutorspod for all your social media. Join the gallery, which is our fan-run, fan-created Facebook group. We'd love to see you there. You can discuss this case or any other case. If you want to watch us record these episodes, you can do so for $3 a month on Patreon. If you want episodes early and ad-free, you can either do that through Patreon for $3 a month, or if you hate Patreon, and so many of you do, for $3 a month on Apple Podcasts, you can also receive the episodes early and ad-free. But rest assured, if you want to save that $3 for your monthly coffee, that's fine. Every single thing we do will always be available to you for free, and you get to listen to ads from Lola Blankets, the most comfortable blanket in the world. Code Prosecutors for 40% off. Okay. All right, Alice, do you have anything else to add before we sign off for today?
Oh, can't wait to see all of you at CrimeCon. Come get a prosecutor. I just love saying it so much.
She does love it. Yes. Come get some socks. Okay. All right, guys. We'll see y'all soon. In fact, we'll see you next week. Well, we'll see you at CrimeCon. We'll talk to you next week. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Hello to all of you who have no lives, you lifeless people.
Whatever.
Y'all losers.
I'm
What
glad
kind of
y'all have an
losers sit around on a
amazing life to
Friday
hang
night
out with us. You are
and,
so
like,
mean. Why do
record
you
a
do stuff
podcast?
like that? Do you know
Losers.
people have feelings
People
even
with
if
lives
you're
are out
joking?
drinking right now. You know?
No, they're drinking with
Partying.
us. They're drinking
They're
with us.
At concerts. And
If you have or you live in a small town where there are no concerts. Case in point, you too.
you have tons of concerts. What are you talking about? You live in a college town.
There was one concert. There was one concert in the last year, and I was out of town for it. Brett and I get asked to do like TV spots now and then, but they're like, you barely have time to say anything. You have like 20 seconds to make your entire brilliant point, right? And so this was about a detention hearing. It wasn't even that in depth. I literally was like, well, it's to see the dangerous of someone if it's opposed, whether they need to be held until, pending trial. And then the guy interviewing me, and he was like, whoa. That was way too in-depth for our listeners. And I was like, really?
At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
The truth is our
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Mom, can you tell me a story?
Sure. Once upon a time, a mom needed a new car.
Was she brave?
She was tired, mostly. But she went to Carvana.com and found a great car at a great price. No secret treasure map required.
Did you have to fight a dragon?
Nope, she bought it 100% online. From her bed, actually.
Was it scary?
Honey, it was as unscary as car buying could be.
Did the car have a sunroof?
It did, actually.
Okay, good story.
Car buying you'll want to tell stories about. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.